Hello everyone, Superintendent Doherty coming to you again with another episode of the Soup of the Day podcast. And my guest today is Christy Steffens. Christy is our District Women's Director, and we're going to talk about women's ministries and women in ministries as well. And so, Christy, as we get started, I know you, but there may be some people watching that don't know a lot about you. So tell us a little bit about your background, how you came to know Jesus, where you are currently in ministry.
Yeah. So, I grew up in the church and got saved at a really young age. And so I feel like I am a pew baby, if that is a term that we still use. I'm not sure. But so I grew up a part of the church. Went to Southwestern, graduated in Waxahachie, Texas.
Did you go to SAGU? I did not know that. Okay.
I did. And so graduated. I've done ministry in the Midwest, in Ohio, and across the state. Some worked in both paraministry and church ministries for quite a few years now. I don't really want to say how many because that will date me.
Yeah, let's not do that. No, we just started. Yeah.
So I'm currently in Columbus, Georgia, serving underneath Pastor Paul, and just really love the team there. But my most the thing I'm the most proud of is my 4 daughters. So I have 4 kiddos who are incredible, who love Jesus and love ministry, which at this stage in life, I'm really proud to say that.
That's awesome. You do have 4 great kids, and I know you're proud of that. So you're at Evangel Church there in Columbus working with Pastor Paul. And how long have you been the District Women's Director?
I think I'm going on 5 years now.
5 years, okay, all
so
right.
4.5, right in there.
Okay, all right. But ministry is nothing foreign to you because you've been in it for a while. And so we want to make sure that we are championing the ministry that you're doing and leading in our district. And you guys recently just did a missions trip to have the conference and whatnot that is going on. But I guess one of my first questions with you today is, in engaging women in ministry, leading that ministry, there commonly are barriers, roadblocks to helping launch them into ministry. What do you think some of those roadblocks are, and how can we kind of help deal with those?
Yeah, so I think that it's twofold. There's external roadblocks and there's internal roadblocks. So to speak to kind of some of the internal roadblocks, and I can speak personally on some of them, and then I've talked to quite a few women who would probably express the same, is that as a kid, although I saw a lot of incredible leaders, I didn't see very many women in leadership. And I remember I was at a church and a guy had given a prophecy over me, and I remember, I actually can go pull out a journal, and I was like, God, that would be really cool. If I was born a man, I could do those things. And it was this internal messaging of like, I have this leadership capacity within me that doesn't have a place, doesn't belong within the context of the church because I didn't see it fitting. And I don't know that that was necessarily society or anyone in particular. This was this internal voice that was going on within me that felt like women couldn't be in leadership and my giftings couldn't be utilized. And then I kind of grew up and started serving in ministries and in different capacities. And I saw that flesh out where it was really tough for women to serve. And so I think there's this internal dialogue with women who, when they dare to believe what God has spoken to them, when they get close enough to Him and He starts giving them visions and passion, and they can't see it in front of them, they can't see a place for them to fulfill that, they have to kind of deal with this imposter syndrome. They have to deal with this idea that, like, God does call women and we can use our voices, and not only can we need to. It's desperately needed within the context of our church today. And so I think internally there's just a lot of work of just making sure we know who we are and are grounded in God's calling, and then being okay to stand firm within that. And then the exterior I got this. Exterior barriers are more, external barriers are more along lines of like, where do we have space at the table to use those voices, and knowing when and how to do that, because my calling I felt like didn't have a place, but there are others who definitely feel called and they wrestle with how to use their voice, and they're more aggressive with trying to create their own space. And so it's not that they're not called, but it's about how do we create a place for them to serve. And so that's where men in leadership who are, I've run into you specifically in this district. I've been such an advocate for women in ministry, and I think that's where the men in our world can help mentor women and can help create space at tables. So there's a couple ways to go about it. It's a big topic.
The Assemblies of God did very well at its founding on ordaining women. one of the few denominations in the United States that would do that. So out of the gate, we did well.
Yes.
Over the years, it's almost like we sort of backed up a little bit.
Culture.
Yeah. So that was going to be my next question is you see how culture is kind of working towards creating barriers or even, and I guess some barriers could be mindsets of those things. And so how do you see the church addressing some of those cultures or those barriers? Or are we actually addressing those?
Yeah, so I think in some regions, in some areas, and some pastors do it really, really well. As a whole, I think the Assembly of God is really fighting for that space. But if we step outside of the Assembly of God, that's really not a conversation that's going well in our world. And so, although the Assembly of God may say, "Hey, we believe in women in ministry," I'll say like, there's 37,000 credentialed ministers in the Assembly of God. It's a little over that. Of that, there's a little over 10,000 women who are credentialed. Of that, there's only 722 lead pastors that are women.
Wow.
So that's not because the Assembly of God or the leadership within our fellowship isn't advocating. I think that's a cultural statement, especially in the Deep South, where the culture itself is not quite ready for it. And so there's a conversation that has to happen more directly with our people in our churches, with our board members, with our leadership in the district and our pastors, that are not just, hey, we need to create space, but how do we advocate a little bit more?
And how does that change your approach to ministry, or what do you do in your approach to ministry to help deal with those barriers?
Yeah, so I think that's based on relationship. So because I am a woman, I'm very careful. If we have relationship, I can have really honest conversations about what it looks like for us to advocate for women in ministry. Is there representation? Are we mentoring? Are we tapping them on the shoulder going, hey, we see a gift in you? Are we, and as men in leadership, that can feel awkward because you're like, I don't really want to call that out in a woman. You're looking for another woman to call that out in a woman. But I think we're kind of past that in a sense that organizationally and professionally, if a man sees a gifting in a woman, they need to find a way to say it.
Yeah.
It's not awkward. It can be empowering in ways that we can't even imagine.
Certainly.
I think your voice in my life has been empowering in ways. And so I think, I think that it's vital. The way that I approach it personally is twofold. I never want to be that girl. And we know what that means. So if I have relationship, I'll speak to it. And if not, I wait for them to ask the question.
Okay.
And so, yeah.
And so I'm a dad of daughters.
Right.
So you've got 4, I only have 3. But one of them, the oldest, is currently in full-time vocational ministry. And I've encouraged that in her with the affirmation side of things. And in her current ministry posting, the church there is very friendly to the idea. I will say that culturally, not every church is open to that.
Correct.
And I think time is on our side too, that as we in the Assemblies of God, especially those in our positions of leadership, of more of a platform to speak to those things, we can help kind of speak to the unspoken barrier.
Right.
We all know that the barrier is there. We just
Right.
really haven't talked about it a lot.
Yeah.
And seeing those improvements. And so how can we intentionally identify, like let's say you're speaking to superintendents, or because we don't have a lot of, people think that superintendents have all this. We're not. We don't have a lot. But
Right.
what we can do is platform things.
Right.
And so how can we, in the positions of leadership, men specifically, help platform those things?
Oh man, it's different, on a superintendent level and on a district level than it is on a local church context level. So
Okay.
I would say on a local church context level, you can see, you can identify who has influence in the way that they represent themselves within relationship and you can tap them on the shoulder and help them start seeing things in themselves that they don't see, and equipping them and helping them, challenging them to go deeper. In the local context, I think it's a little bit easier than on these district level or on this level, because it's a little harder to see what they're doing in their everyday. But I would say consistency, heart is everything for me. I can sit and talk to a woman and in 30 minutes see if they're pursuing a platform or if their heart is burdened for a thing. And so I think that's really important.
Oh, wait, stop, back up on that for just a minute. So I want you to unpack that a little bit. Pursuing a platform versus a heart for a particular thing.
Yes.
Unpack that a little bit for me.
So I believe that each one of us have a calling and a purpose. No matter what role God has us in, right? We have a burden that's uniquely ours. And so I think that every person and every leader, every pastor, in every position has a burden. And I always want to know, what's your burden? If your burden is to speak, I'm less interested in platforming you because you want to hear the sound of your own voice. If your burden is because you see broken in people, or because you have a heart for a particular group, or because God's passioned you with a certain message that is timely for this group, then I'm more apt to utilize you, because I feel like, especially in women's ministry, there's had to be this elbowing out for women to have a space at the table. And so there are some of us who have a little bit of a chip on our shoulder, and I have to say rightfully so, because they've been misused and damaged. But I'm very protective of the space that I'm creating now, and I think that all superintendents and leaders should be very protective of the space, that when we platform people, it's because they have a burden, not because they're gifted to speak. It's because God's placed something in their heart that needs to be shared. So
that is profound. Thank you, Christy. So in talking about that, there was something that you mentioned about calling out giftings in others. So in the platform that I am on, and in the position that I occupy as a superintendent, a lot of times we will help churches navigate through transitions.
Sure.
And a lot of the times, the pastor who is leading that ministry, really, transition becomes more of an afterthought later on in the years, rather than a forethought of how can I raise up. And I will just tell you, sometimes our preconceived notions of who our successor is going to be is a young man.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Well, who's the young man that's going to lead this church after I'm done? I would love to encourage them to think about, well, maybe it's not just a young man, but maybe there's a young lady. You mentioned the number of lead pastors. We only have 700 and some change, 722. Yeah. Now, in Georgia, we've got a handful. We do, and they are doing a phenomenal job.
Yes.
Emily down in Brunswick, knocking it out of the park. Melody over in Savannah, knocking it out of the park. And we have others as well. So how do we get people to think about that transition and that handing of the baton? It doesn't necessarily have to be a young man. There may be a young woman in your congregation that has the anointing of God on their life to preach the gospel and reach a community. How do we change our mindset about that?
Ooh, that's so tough because it's so ingrained. And it's honestly then what you're looking at is the transition is a board that you really have to talk to. There may be a pastor who's helping you pass that baton, but a lot of times it's a board. And so that's a conversation that has to take place at district council.
Well, I think we begin to platform those young women. Yes. And use them in those things, and really get our congregations to think a little more broadly about, well, it's not just the young man. It is, hey, like my daughter's a youth pastor who does...
Representation matters.
Yeah.
But mindset's a little bit different.
Yeah.
So, because you can have token women in any position in any place.
Right.
But impact is different. When the women actually so if your daughter were to preach and give an altar call and there was actually impact on a long-term basis, that changes mindsets and that changes hearts. So most people are welcome to a woman speaking on Mother's Day, but if a woman were to do the majority of the speaking, that touches on a completely different heart mindset. Honestly, this is a challenge I give to a lot of the guys that I'm close with who are leading really well, is how many women are you actually listening to right now? I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you listen to any women's podcast? Do you read any books written by women? Do you listen to any sermons written or preached by women? So how many voices are you currently actually taking in that are the sound of a woman? So for me, I've grown up under men's ministry, so I can listen to you give a sports analogy and apply that to my own life. The converse is not true for a man in a congregation. When you start talking about a shopping experience as your idea, the guys check out. So it's not just about platforming, it's about educating them how to connect. But then conversely, we've got to have a mindset shift where men actually hear the voice of women and can give it credit and give it merit and not dismiss it.
That is an incredible perspective. No. Well, that's why you're here.
Yeah.
I mean, is so, and just for those who are watching, I gave her license, hey, come in here and really share your heart. And that's, well, we need an advocate though. and to get and challenging people to think outside of their familiar boxes, and that's what we do. We get, and I know I get into a rut, and you just challenged me. How many female leaders am I listening to on my podcast? And the truth is, and I'm ashamed to say this, maybe one. Maybe.
Right.
Now, I do listen to speakers like preachers, and sermons of those things, and there's an entirely different perspective. Like you just said, the shopping experience versus the sports analogy. Well,
right.
Hey man, I just, by the way, it's okay to go shopping for more than just shoes, okay?
Yes.
But that is an incredible thing for us to think about. How many are we actually utilizing to speak into our own lives? And that is an incredible perspective.
And I'll also say, like, as a leader, then the grace. So just like statistically, the guys have more reps. So when you have a woman come in and preach and they don't knock it out of the park, or they don't quite connect, it's because they don't have as many reps. And so as you invite them in to lead, you have to give a little bit of space for them to not be perfect. But then conversely, I would say to any woman who is given an opportunity, we have a huge responsibility to be ready and prepared and do everything in our power to speak the message that God has given us in a way that is palatable. So we can't get up and just try to defy and go, you'll hear it the way that God, I want to say it. You have to really challenge yourself to know your audience and be prepared and knock it out of the park for the girls that are following.
Look, when I came up, my pastor put me in the pulpit on Sunday nights. Now, we don't do that anymore, hardly. Shout out to Sunday Night Church, but he put me in the pulpit, and I'll tell you, the first, I don't even want to think about how bad it was, because it was really bad.
Yeah.
I mean, the first time I ever spoke, I had pages and pages of notes, and it was 12 minutes because I talked so fast. It was horrible. And I'm trying to block those memories out. I think you can block painful memories out as a self-preservation tool, and I'm trying to block those out. But doing those Sunday nights and Wednesday nights and occasionally on a Sunday morning and whatnot, you're right, it's those reps. And so are we putting our female leaders into the pulpit and giving them those opportunities, not relegating it to just a Bible study in the fellowship hall, but actually giving them that platform to preach the Word of God and give them that practice? You're absolutely right.
I hear a lot of guys will say, like, well, I just don't have anybody who has those giftings. And I'm like, okay, but how are you cultivating those giftings if you never give them an opportunity?
Well, that was going to be my next question.
Sorry.
No, you're reading my mind.
Yeah.
The next question is, so you, and a lot of this comes back to discernment. And so we're seeing, I see in my girls, and specifically the oldest one, that there's a leadership disposition.
Right.
And there's a huge heart for the hurting too, ultra high compassion. And so in encouraging, not just verbally, but seeing in them those things and encouraging them, speaking to them, man, you got a great heart. You really love people. Man, you love people so well. You have a great leadership disposition. You have a great mind in those things. So how do we pull out of those young leaders, using our discernment that, man, maybe God does have his hand on that young lady, to really bring it out? How do we do that? How do we pull that encouragement out of them?
Yeah. So, man, there's so many different ways that you can, and it really, to me, is based off of your own personality and your own ministry's kind of way that it functions. But I would say my number one way is anytime I see someone who has a sphere of influence, you can just tell they walk in the room and people flock to them. I then end up kind of talking to them and start talking about what their life is and where they've come from and what their burden is and what they're passionate about, and helping them to learn to articulate it has been the big thing for me. And then giving them direction and mentorship. But I think there's so many great mentorship programs out there right now. I think like Lisa Potter has one, and we do one here at the district called Collective Journey, and that's through Lisa Potter. There's a lot of books out there, like Restless is incredible. There's that can help them start formulating what it looks like. But it's really the discernment. It's you looking in your crowd and going, okay, who is currently serving? Who cares about the details? Who's showing up early as a volunteer? Who's problem solving without causing issues? Who's managing conflict really well? All of those are incredible giftings, especially the managing conflict part. If you can't lead unless you can do that, right? So as you start to see women functioning, you can call them up and give them different aspects of the ministry and let them try things and fail and move forward. To say there's like one specific formula, it's tough because it's really based on each personality of the leader. but we have to start identifying them. And I will say this, I know that we are looking at a shortage in the global church of leaders. And my guess is there is a lot of women who just don't see it in themselves. And if someone would tap them on the shoulder, we would not have a shortage anymore. 60% of our church is made up of women. So if we were to start tapping on some shoulders and start identifying leadership, I think that we would see a huge shift in those numbers.
We would solve our problems.
We could.
You talked about, tapping that young lady on the shoulder and just saying, you know what, I see something in you. I whether it be God, speaking to me or whatever, but I see a gifting in you. What are those traits that you're looking for in that young leader? So if there's a young lady watching at home right now thinking, I think God may be dealing with my heart. You mentioned a few in the last segment of some of the things that you look for, but what are some traits that you feel like as a young leader or someone who's thinking about it that they really should develop? You mentioned conflict resolution being one of them.
Yeah, I think if you feel called into ministry, if God's given you at all a passion or a dream, I think the first thing you need to do is you need to sit down and you need to write it down. You need to articulate what your personal vision and mission statement is. You need to know what it is that you're fighting for and where you're aiming your ministry and your life work. And once you've kind of figured that out, then what you can do is you can take some steps to go, okay, I feel like God personally, I feel a huge burden for women. I feel like they're the sleeping giants of the next revival. And so because of that, I'm going to go and look at all of the things alongside women's ministry, and I'm going to start educating myself so that when I speak to the issue, I have some weight behind me. So if you feel passionate about foster care, or if you feel passionate about youth ministry, then what you need to do is you need to go find a mentor, and you need to ask a lot of really great questions. You need to serve, not be in a position of leadership, but you need to go find a way to serve. So if you're passionate about foster care, go serve at an adoption clinic, something. Do something to get in the room and just experience what's going on so that you can have context for what it is that you're building and creating and working in hand with God with. So get experience and serve. I would say articulate your mission, your vision, your passion, and then have a mentor. And the last is be on your face with God. I just think so many of us, we absolutely get it backwards. We start seeking a platform, a stage. I love the business side of the church, and so I educate myself on all the policies and procedures. But at the end of the day, it's God who knows what's needed for this specific situation and this specific community. And so I think when you just get on your face at a very young age, if you can get this right, I promise you your ministry will go further. The Holy Spirit has ways of giving you insight and timing at just the right season that no amount of education can do for you. So you have to do both. You got to get with Jesus, get a mentor, and get serving and educate yourself.
And one thing you just touched on about prayer, and this is for male, female, just young leaders as a whole, but I'll apply it specifically to what we're talking about, is a lot of times we see that leader that we idolize on the platform doing ministry. What we don't see is them in their prayer closet.
Right.
Or we don't see them serving faithfully the years prior, just even in my life, I've had people say to me, man, you really got it good. I'm like, yeah, well, you're catching the end of the movie. Okay.
Right.
You're catching you're on this is chapter 30.
Yeah.
You didn't see chapters 1 through 10.
Right.
Okay. Where you're really, you're like you said, you show up, but your prayer life has to be going as well. And so I would tell the young ladies that are watching, and even young men or whoever, is that God does the promotion.
Absolutely.
He does the anointing, he does the gifting, but he also does the promotion too.
Right.
And so you've got to trust him in that. And if you're fighting for a platform, like I feel like you're fighting for the wrong thing. You fight for Jesus. You fight for the heart of God.
Right.
And the other things come along with it. So the platforms, the influence, the opportunities and those things, those come along with it. And so when we're talking about these young leaders, and you touched on something that really we need to spend more time on, and that is we have a lack of pastors. We have a wave of boomers that are about to retire.
Yeah.
just in Georgia, but across the Assemblies of God, churches across the nation, because at one time being a pastor was an elevated, well-respected thing. The word parson comes from, it was an early iteration of the word the person, which meant the person in the village who was the most educated, he was the problem solver, the pastor. So that the parson, the person, he was the person or she was the person in that community. And it used to be that now the office of pastor is ridiculed.
It is.
And so we don't have this wave of leaders coming through. And we, like you just said, 60% of the church body is female. We have the answer sitting in our chairs. Mm-hmm. We've just got to take the opportunity to say, hey, I see something in you. Mm-hmm. and really lean into it. So in women's ministry, I know you're focusing on these things, but what do you have coming up in the future that you feel like would really help tap into this generation of young female leaders?
I think generally, we do have the mentorship program that I love.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Yep, it's a 6-month program. Okay. And so you go through a series of books. We have an opening retreat and a closing retreat. And so a part of that is the first book that you read is honestly an incredible book for any leader called Strengthening the Soul of Your Leadership by Ruth Barton. And she kind of walks you through what does it look like to just be with Jesus and to get that right first. And so I'm super excited because if we can get a younger generation grounded, I think that's why the church is ridiculed now, is because we didn't say grounded, right? So if we can get this younger generation really grounded in what the main thing, keeping the main thing. And so you walk through that, you walk through kind of unpacking your passion, your vision. What does it look like? What is your past? And we say that God's calling is typically birthed out of your life experience and where you see the greatest need. And so that becomes your burden, what God's burdened you with. And so what is that? Let's articulate what that is. Then we look at what's your network, who's going to help you get there, who are your mentors and who are your mentees. How are we building health and sustainability around that? And then we look to launch you into whatever that
That's incredible. And so with that, you have the reading, the coaching, the Zoom calls, meetings.
So we have opening retreat, closing retreat, 5 books that you read, and then we have a once-a-month Zoom meeting with the group, which we keep it to 10 or less, just so that we have intimacy there. And then we have one-on-one mentoring as well. And so I walk with you personally through
incredible
what you're experiencing in leadership, whatever hardships, life, kids, whatever it is, and we just.
So if a young lady's at home, she's watching this, how do they get it? How do they get
so
signed
they
up?
can go on the website and they can register, they can email me, call
Is there
me.
an age limit? Is there?
No,
okay.
I've had as young as 18 go through it and as old as 62.
Come on.
Because
That's
I
awesome.
believe that it's never too late, and we need our older women to actually step into calling just as much as we need our younger.
Oh, absolutely we do.
So.
That is fantastic. Well, Christy, thank you for your heart for ministry. Thank you for our young ladies and your heart for them and raising up leaders. And I just echo what you're saying, that our answer is in front of us. And so thank you for that. Appreciate your heart for Georgia. Pastors, you see a young lady in your congregation and God is speaking to you about that, an opportunity there. Go and take that opportunity and say, hey, you know what? We see something in you. That may be the answer for you, not just in your staff needs, but in the future of the church as well. And so we want to elevate them. We want to give them those opportunities. So thank you so much for your heart for our next generation. We love you. We'll see you next time.